All right, we're back, Paul. So we did a video last week on abortion, and we talked about some of the conflicts that exist between the pro-life and the pro-choice people, even though both of us kind of admit that we don't really like that kind of terminology. But we talked about the different ways that people perceive what a fetus is. You know, does a woman have a right to do what she wants with her own body? And we kind of argued that it's not a part of a woman's body.
Yeah. You know, that's too much power for one person.
We only put half the video up, so we're going to put the second half of the video up this week, and we're just kind of doing a brief introduction.
Yeah, this is just to show you that we are still there.
Yeah, we're still here.
Yeah.
So there was so much content that we were able to get out of this one. We don't want the videos to get too long, but I didn't want to cut out any content. We just decided to split it up into 2 parts. So this is part 2.
Yeah, you know, enjoy part 2, and we hope that you gain some insight from it.
Yeah, and we'll be back with a new video next week in 7 days. New content and everything. So yeah, so leave us your comments. Tell us what you think. Comment about what we have to say, or comment about topics that you'd like to see us do in the future.
Yeah, and don't forget to enjoy the video.
Yeah, always enjoy the video.
When a woman is pregnant, she's vulnerable. And you're manipulating that vulnerability to just have a narrative. There's a conspiracy theory I read about of, it's called something about depopulation. It's called...
Depopulation, that the abortion is actually a means of birth control where they're trying to depopulate them.
Is it depopulation? No.
It's depopulation, so it's trying to reduce the number of people. So, for example, there's been 1 billion babies that have been aborted since abortion, generally became legal in the world. If you look at since like maybe the early 1970s, there's been over 60 million abortions in the U.S. and there's been 1 billion in the world. You know, we got a population right now of around 8 billion people. Well, there would have been 9 billion people or whatever.
The word is population control.
Yeah, the conspiracy theory that abortion is a means of population control.
Yeah, I can go there. So yeah, there's a conspiracy theory that I've had about population control, and in this theory of population control, there is they find abortion, and at long terms the radical feminism also lands in there because it makes reproduction difficult and divorce and all that. But it's just a theory. It's not fact. But the idea, it can still make sense that you don't want people to populate, because of your different agendas, and you're promoting this pernicious behavior. But you won't be there when this girl is suffering with nightmares. When she's having PTSD, you won't be there.
You won't be there. Right? When she regrets the fact that she had an abortion and she realizes she killed a baby.
Exactly. And
the trauma that's going to result from that. And it happens. Women experience
it. And it's
this.
real. And even the risk of ectopic pregnancy in the future, abortion risks a lot to the child, to the person, or the woman that is executing it, than you can imagine. But then, because we have our agendas, we encourage them to do it, and we support them, and we give them a lot of power that you're in charge. It's your body. But then, when they're struggling with it, you're not there.
Another argument I've heard, people in the pro-choice camp will say, but you're not going to be there. You're going to force this woman to have this baby, but you're not going to be there to help her raise that child. And I've heard this argument oftentimes used by pro-choice people. And the reality is, at least in the United States, that argument does not work because pro-life people are involved in establishing pregnancy resource centers and other ways to help women. We are actually the ones who are helping women to have these children. Yeah. It always bothers me when I hear pro-choice people making these arguments and saying, well, you're not going to be there for them when they give birth, when actually we are the ones who are there when they choose to give birth. We are the ones who are helping them. We are the ones who are giving them alternatives to aborting their child. We are the ones who are there.
What are those alternatives, Bobby? For example, if someone had a child, but then maybe they were not ready to have a child, are there such alternatives like adoption, foster care?
But that's another thing, like adoption, for example. Adoption is always an alternative because, in the U.S., for example, and again, I'm using U.S. examples. Okay, I'm using
because you're from the U.S.
I'm from the U.S. And you would have.
Give my own.
I don't know if these arguments work in Uganda. I don't know how well they work in Uganda. But in the U.S., there are more couples who are wanting to adopt children than there are abortions being done in the U.S. every year. In other words, there's no such thing as an unwanted pregnancy. There is somebody who wants that child. And it's funny to me how the pro-choice camp will use this argument of unwanted pregnancy. But there's no such thing. There's no such thing as an unwanted pregnancy.
Yeah. We also have our Ugandan or African way of approach to it. Before I get to it, I always brag about our president. I may not support most of the things he says, but I know he's one of the wisest persons that I've experienced in my life. So there's a time during COVID, some NGOs were pushing him to reopen schools, and I know there's a different narrative in the US about reopening schools in COVID, but his idea was to reopen schools because you feel children are losing out by not going to class. But then you want me to risk girls are getting pregnant while they're not studying, because during COVID, the girls from schools got pregnant. There was pregnancy all over the place because they're not studying, they're not busy, and they're just exposed to sexual content, and men approaching them because they're idle. So many pregnancies happen. So we have very many COVID babies in Uganda. But so they were telling the president, okay, because the girls are getting pregnant so much, why don't you reopen schools and we take the girls back to school and save them? Because school is, in a way, the best contraceptive out there. So the president said that does pregnancy kill? Because girls were getting pregnant and people are like, we rather have them back in school so we save them from getting pregnant. Like, does pregnancy kill? But the other COVID kills. So instead of risking their health, they could catch COVID, I'd rather they get pregnant. They'll give birth. 1 year later, they can come back to school. And much as he faced a lot of outroar against it, well, he still stood. The girls got pregnant, they had children, and those who were able to go back to school went back to school, and they're not denied the education. And most of them, when you talk to them, they're happy about their babies. They love their children. And Uganda is, like I said earlier in the earlier episodes, Uganda is. We still have our African oneness. Your grandmother can take care of your child. Your uncle can adopt your child while you're still going to school. So many are having children that are still young, and their extended families take them in, and they are able to still survive and still go on with their life, even without the stops of having a child. So the consequences of having a child less planned for, there's still a support structure, especially here in Africa, that you can get support and people can still adopt your child and help you. So while in the US they can do foster care and homes, which we still have here, but on the lower end, we still have a very big support system where people are just wanting babies. Please bring the baby. Your grandfather wants the child at home, a grandson. You take them in and they will still support you.
Earlier, Paul, I had talked about, I had said, I think we have to go back and look at the recording to see what my exact quote was. I had said that what people want is the benefits of sex without the responsibility that comes with the consequences of sex. So when I make those kind of arguments, there are always people that are going to come around and say, but what about cases of rape, incest, and things like that? So they become the justification for abortion on demand, because there are these real examples of rape or incest, or maybe you even have a child 13 years old who gets pregnant and it might be dangerous for her to give birth. While I might be criticized by some pro-life, quote unquote, people for saying this, I'm willing to acknowledge that there's exceptions, because there are always exceptions. But the problem that I have is when people try to use the exception to establish the rule. And we've actually talked about this in many other things that we've talked about. We've talked about gender roles, for example. The male is kind of the provider, the hunter, the kind of the traditional kind of expectations about what the male is to be. The male provides for the woman. But then we've also seen that there have been exceptions to that. There are some cultures where women are basically in charge of the society.
Yeah.
And so we understand that this is not a universal thing, that there are exceptions. We talked about gender and how we were saying that because there's a real condition called intersex, that does not mean that there's an unlimited number of genders. The exception does not make the rule.
People who have intentionally had sex, they're safe to have children, but then they're just having risky sex. They're not planning for the sex, they're just having and enjoying it just for the fun of it. They're not underage, they are not being raped, they're not, it's not incest, it's not any of these risky situations or unwanted situations. They're just actually having fun. But then those are the people who are bought the most. So those cases which are exceptions actually on a lower end.
Right. 1% are from women who have been raped. And 0.5%, or actually less than 0.5%, are because of incest. So you're talking a very, very small percentage. 98.5% or more than 98.5% of abortions are not in these exceptional circumstances.
Yeah, so with all the alternatives that we have for protected sex, if someone chooses to go on the unprotected way, then they should be able to go with the ramifications. In fact, they're not even ramifications, the benefits of sex, the responsibility that comes with it. We're not per se judging people who get
definitely not
unplanned pregnancies, but then we also
definitely not. There's forgiveness and there's grace.
Yeah,
I don't support laws that would punish women who have abortions because I believe that they're victims of their circumstances, and I would not support any law that would punish a woman who's had an abortion.
Yeah, so when a person has an abortion, at that point of abortion, they feel that's the best thing they can do. So before we even blame the person who is aborting, why are they aborting in the first place?
Yes.
It's the information out there that is empowering them to abort. How about we have pro-life information out there so that they can know alternatives, but in case they were to abort, it would be one of the most unlikely outcomes of the pregnancy. Abortion should be on the lower end. But many girls, many women, when they get pregnant, it's either the first choice or the second alternative among a plethora. And that's where the problem is, because we are promoting abortion in a way. With the information that we give out, we are promoting it. And whether we should be able to promote the alternatives to an abortion, of which the best one of them is to just have your child and walk through life with it, because life is not easy. Even the parent that had you, it's not like they had everything figured out. Many a time, there are few parents who have had everything figured out when they had children, but they have them and they take care of them and they raise you. So even you don't really per se have to first figure out everything before you have a child.
One last thing that I want to talk about, Paul. We've talked about terminology already. We've talked about terminology like pro-life, pro-choice, fetus. But there's some other terms that I want to bring in as well. And these terms are things like reproductive care and terminate a pregnancy. That there's this terminology out there that is designed to minimize the severity of what an abortion actually is. It's like they don't want women to know what they're actually doing. So they use terms like terminate a pregnancy. You make it objective. It's a pregnancy, it's not a baby. And you're terminating it, you're not killing it. What you're doing objectively is killing a baby, but they don't like that terminology. So they say terminate a pregnancy. And then they call abortion reproductive care. Why wouldn't they just come right out and tell you this is a baby? Because they don't want you to know that, because then you won't get abortions. And abortion is a big moneymaker.
So basically, there's someone gaining out of the abortion.
There's somebody gaining. There's somebody making money, and a lot of money from abortions. So, yeah, I mean, you have to think about it. They don't do abortions for free. 60 million abortions in the U.S. since 1973, and over 1 billion abortions worldwide. That's a lot of money.
Sure, should be a lot.
Yeah.
And that's, you take into account the unrepresented statistics like in Africa. I don't think we have our statistics up to date really. Our statistics are, I'm sure they're underscored.
Yeah. Do we really know how many abortions are taking place? Because I think even among U.S. statistics, depending upon the source that you look at, there's differences because not everything's being taken into consideration. And the thing is, of course, in the U.S., everything has changed because Donald Trump became president. Donald Trump said that he was going to appoint judges to the Supreme Court who would be pro-life, and he actually did that. And there was enough judges that were pro-life that were appointed to the Supreme Court that they actually overturned Roe v. Wade. And now it's up to each state to decide whether they will allow abortion or not. So each of the 50 states in the U.S. can decide that, can pass their own laws about abortion. People had this idea that when the Roe v. Wade decision was overturned in the U.S., that meant suddenly that abortion was going to become illegal everywhere in the U.S., and that didn't happen. But that wasn't what the decision was to overturn Roe v. Wade. The decision to overturn Roe v. Wade was that it's up to each state to decide. For some states it's illegal, and in other states it's legal, and in some states it's illegal with exceptions. So, but I know that there are some states in the U.S. that are passing laws now that don't have exceptions. And of course, I probably would have some objections to that because I believe that there should be some exception.
Maybe my last argument would be about, I think we talked about it earlier, but I feel like we should talk about it a little bit deeper. Whose decision is it to abort? Is it for the female or for the male? Because many a time we only think about the woman, and that's why no wonder we say it's a woman's body and it's her choice. But then, where does that leave the men? In the end, we're creating bitter men. You know, because I'm expecting a child and you deny me the paternity opportunity, and you find that this guy could face all the different mental illnesses that come along with it, and you could find that this guy could have trust issues with relationships. They may struggle with future relationships. They may struggle from grief, etc. In a way that you can create an irresponsible man out of this situation. Because if I try to have a child and it's aborted against my will, then you could find that I could aggress on an innocent woman in the next phase of my relationships. So you find that we're creating men who are hurt or are damaged by decisions which are pertinent to them, but then they have no say. So how about we also include men in the decision making?
And maybe that could be something we can, if we want to come back to this topic, we can talk about in the next video.
All right.
But I think for now, I think we've kind of come to the end of it, Paul. So I'd like to thank everybody again for watching our videos, and please comment if you have anything to say or if there's any topics you would like to see us do in the future. So bye for now. We'll see you in about 7 days.